Talking SIUE men's soccer with the head coach of the Cougars, Cale Wasserman. Coach, good to see you again. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, good to see you as well. Last time I saw you, you were here on campus at the OVC tournament, but great to see you on screen now today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining the pod. And yeah, it's such great memories back in November. It was great to be back home in the St. Louis area. Great to be back home on the SIUE campus. And the last time we saw each other, your team was finishing off a OVC double in dramatic fashion. You get the conference's automatic bid. You go back to the NCAA tournament. Such a special year for your team. What was your favorite part about coaching this year's bunch?
Oh man, what a year. What a year. I would say honestly, one of the biggest things for us was 2 years ago we had a magical season going, I think it was 19 games unbeaten, and we had an amazing group of guys, great culture, but we also had like 12 seniors. So going into 2024, we had 12 seniors. We had one guy step away from the team for personal reasons. So 13 of our 26 guys were gone. So all of a sudden we found ourselves with only 13 returners. It's half the team. So going into this year, we had a little bit of a target on our back, but also had to do a little bit of a rebuild and bring in guys at different positions, rely on some new guys. Watch some returners that had smaller roles in 2023 step up and have bigger roles. So I mean, one of my favorite things was just seeing how that process went and, finding a way to win games in different ways than we did in 2023 and just to find some of the same success. Obviously, some of the big moments like winning the bronze boot in the MLS stadium over at City Park and then winning the double in the league with half the team being new is not something that happens every day. So it was a special year to follow up the 2023 season with another amazing 2024. But just love the group of new guys that came in with the combination of such a solid foundation of returners. Made it really special. And then, that moment at the OVC tournament, with the departure of regular season overtimes, I hadn't been a part of an overtime game in quite a while. And so I just saw a picture the other day. Our photographer was in here. We were going through some photos, and we have a freshman on our team, Riley Gibbs. He's out of St. Louis City's academy, and there's this picture of him going like this. He's like after the game because he had never been. It was his first college soccer overtime game, and it was golden goal to win a championship. So, what a moment! What a year! A lot of special memories from this past fall.
You bring up, a great point because I was sad to see Golden Goal go away, but I'm glad they've brought it back and they've tweaked it so it's postseason only. It's created such great memories like what we saw at Ralph Cordy Stadium when you all won the OVC championship on a Golden Goal. You talk about having to reload the roster coming into this most recent season, and I know now on the heels of that, you graduate a good amount of talent from this year's roster. As a head coach, how difficult is it to have to continually reload your roster? I mean, how much stress does that put on you as a human being?
I mean, one, recruiting is just a never-ending cycle. Like people ask me all the time, like, when's your busy recruiting time? Or like, is the fall, is the spring? It's like, it's all the time. Even in the middle of the fall, we're watching videos, we're having visits. Our staff is finding ways on a weekend to go watch a local academy game or drive a couple hours, watch a game, and then drive back and quickly have an afternoon practice. So you're constantly recruiting. It's a challenge, but also you're developing your guys. And so as much as it is about bringing in talent and filling the pieces, you also have to keep in mind, like, you have great, if you're doing things right, you have great guys underneath. Like I think of a guy on our team like a Bobby Pauley, where in 2023 he played spot minutes. We had two really good fifth year seniors at outside back. So Bobby was playing 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, and then continued to develop through the spring. And he played in the summer and was a massive part of everything this year. Played 90 minutes almost every game. So it's about development as well as recruiting at the same time. But it's a challenge for sure. When you have two successful seasons like we've had, oftentimes you find yourself in a position where you have a lot of good upperclassmen, which means you have to find a way to quickly turn it around. So, we're in a similar boat this year as we are last year. We were able to bring in 5 new guys in January, though, which has helped us fill the void a little bit, where in August we'll only be bringing in 4 new guys. So it'll be much easier this year to implement 4 new guys in August, excuse me, as opposed to last year. We had 9 new guys, and college soccer, as you know, the preseason is very short. So you're talking, 2 weeks basically. Set usually it's about 17 days from your first training to your first regular season game. So the more cohesion and consistency you can kind of build throughout the spring makes that transition in the fall a little better. But it's a challenge. Everybody in college soccer is dealing with it. You also have the transfer portal and some of that churn, and so the quicker you can get consistency and cohesion along with talent, the better off you're going to be.
I know culture is so important to you and your coaching staff there at SIUE. And you mentioned that about a player like a Bobby Pauly who bides his time behind two talented players, works hard in the offseason, and then is rewarded for that effort. When you see players go about it that way, how much of that do you credit to the culture that you and your coaching staff have established in Edwardsville?
It's big time. It's big time to have players like that. Another one I'll reference was Jacobo Senfeliu. He was actually a junior in 2023, but he transferred in. It took him a little time to adjust, and we had some really good attacking players in front of him. We had the attacking player of the year in the conference. We had a second team all conference forward. So he was kind of like in Bobby's position, but Bobby was different because Bobby was a true freshman. Jacobo, as a 21-year-old junior who transferred from the NAIA, where he was the best player on his team, he scored 20 goals at the NAIA level the year before, or something like that. You know, I think a player like that, it's almost more challenging. Whereas a freshman, I got 3 years left. I'm going to bide my time for a season. Where his clock is running out. I really credit a kid like that, who, by the way, scored 7 or 8 goals for us, was all conference this year, was a fantastic personality as well. But yeah, the culture is big time. This is a very historic program. We have a lot of alums that I'm very connected with that love to tell the stories of, the national championship in 72 and 79 and, Final Fours throughout the early 2000s as well. But the word that comes up a lot is intangibles. I'm not the first coach here. I won't be the last. One of the things we try to do is take some of the lessons from the groups before us. And, I'm close with some of the early 70s players, and they always talk about the intangibles. And in the Bob Gelker days, who was our first coach here and won a national championship, he always talked about intangibles. So a big part of our culture is the work rate, the communication, the grit, the mental toughness. I try to recruit the most talented players we can, but without those things, we're nothing. And we've been very fortunate over the past couple years to have some really good player leadership. Our two captains in 2023, Al-Sadiq Hassan and Sam Gomez, were fantastic leaders. They both signed professionally after their time here. But we lost two great senior captains that year. And we had two new guys step in, Nacho Abial and Wes Gibson. Wesley Gibson's our center back, who's he had to bide his time. He came in his freshman year. He redshirted. He had a big surgery with his groin. He had some nerve damage, and all of a sudden he found himself 2-3 years in and hadn't played much. And so he went through some of the ups and downs that other players go through. And now, as a fifth-year senior, was able to put his arm around some younger guys, saying, "I've been in your shoes. I've had to train hard every day and push the group and maybe not get the reward of the minutes." And so I think when you have some of your top players that have also experienced that, and it's so relatable amongst the group, if all your best players are just from day one, they've been your best players, it's great to have talent like that, but it might not be as relatable to a redshirt freshman or a guy going through an injury. And so the culture's been huge. It's been honestly the biggest reason I feel that we've had the success we've had. Obviously, we've done some things intentionally as coaches in how we build that culture, but the credit goes to the players to be bought in and to work for each other. And I'm really, really excited and proud of the groups we've had, but excited for the continuation of that culture. We have a big group this spring, and we've been off to a great start. I think it starts in the locker room.
Since 2019, you all have won 51 matches under your direction as head coach. That puts you up there with the likes of the Clemsons, the Marshalls, the West Virginias, the Notre Dames. I mean, we're talking elite college soccer territory. And you referenced that proud history that SIUE has. But how have you and your coaching staff been able to take the reins and not just build on that, but really run with that and start to take SIUE into that upper echelon of Division One soccer?
Yeah, it's one, you're putting us in some high level uh you know terms there, and I appreciate that. Our goal is to be one of the top programs in the country. So those are some big name programs that we highly respect, but at the same time feel we want to be competing with. Yeah, it's not easy. It's a little bit of a two-part thing where you want to have a unique identity and style and consistency on one side, but you also have to be willing to improvise and adapt. This in my 6 years here, I've been in three different conferences for one reason or another. When we arrived, we were in the MAC. Um, Geographically, that didn't make the most sense for us. The MAC was also kind of in some transitional phases with some teams coming in and out. Geographically, it made more sense for us to be in the Missouri Valley, so we had to adapt a little bit without changing our style and identity too much, but knowing that the style of the league and the opponents is going to be a little different from league to league. And then most recently, the last 2 years, we joined the rest of our programs who compete in the Ohio Valley. And that's been fantastic to be in the same conference as basketball and tennis and baseball, where before men's soccer was sponsored in that conference, we were always an affiliate. So now being a full member, we can fully buy into the Ohio Valley Conference and really kind of lock in how we want to play and compete. But yeah, so I feel we've been consistent and kind of strong in how we want to play, but also we've had to adapt and improvise because from team to team, from field to field, from opponent to opponent, there's going to be some changes. Certain games we're going to press a little higher or get pressed a little higher. Certain games we're going to be more direct or more patient. But you don't want to fluctuate too much because you still want to have an identity. And so we try to find that balance between having our very clear identity, but also being willing to change personnel when needed, play a different system when needed, but still maintain the same style. And so there's unique challenges with every season, every opponent. We try to challenge ourselves with some really tough non-conference opponents as well in the last couple of years. Playing teams, we play SLU every year, which is a local rivalry, but teams like Ohio State, Michigan State, Dayton. Next year we'll go play Denver, who was in the Final Four this year. So trying to find that balance of being clear in our identity, but also knowing that from game to game we're going to have to be willing to adapt and change. And sometimes that means in how we prep for the game, but also sometimes that means you could come into a game plan and have a really clear plan, but 15 minutes in, if you realize something's not working and you're stubborn and hard-headed, and I've been that guy and been the mouse electrocuting himself a couple times in a row. One of the biggest things I've learned here is that in my years where maybe my second or third year where we didn't have as much success, is I've got to be willing to change and adapt in moments and make risky subs when needed, or play a little differently. So those are some of the things as a staff where we try to be clear, but also know that everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face, as they say with Mike, the old Mike Tyson quote. There's been games where we knew exactly what we wanted to do, and 15 minutes in, it wasn't working. So we had to be willing to say, okay, we're going to change this now before it gets too late. And so, we found some good success working with our players and helping them understand that, as well as we have a clear identity, but you guys have to make decisions on your own. You have to give us information that you see on the field. We have to be willing to adapt and change. And guys on the bench, you got to compete every day because you never know from game to game. You might be a 15-minute guy. The next game, you might be a 70-minute guy for one reason or another. And so our players have been tremendous in being flexible with that. And the depth of our groups has shown through in that regard as well.
You mentioned in that answer about the Bronze Boot Derby with St. Louis, played at now Energizer Park. It used to be formerly City Park in downtown. The name change recently going through.
I actually think it's Energizer Field or Energizer Park at City Park, which is the
Okay.
surrounding area, maybe. So, but yeah, I think it is Energizer now, which is an exciting change and a cool, beautiful stadium. If those listening and watching haven't been there, highly recommend making the trip to St. Louis to be a part of that atmosphere.
Despite the fact that I am from St. Louis, I am one of those who have yet to make my way to City Park to go see a match. I desperately, desperately need to. When I moved from St. Louis, the MLS team was still a pipe dream. There was no, I mean, the USL team had just folded up shop recently
Yeah.
by the time I moved from St. Louis. So I need to go. It looks like a beautiful place, but it's so important to the history of St. Louis soccer and St. Louis area soccer that rivalry resumed. And I'm curious, how did it come about that the Bronze Boot returned, and how glad are you that the Bronze Boot is back?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a historic rivalry. It's a special thing to be a part of. For those listening that maybe aren't as familiar, we are about 25 minutes, driving from each other's university. St. Louis University, a highly respected program. Both of our programs have national championships under our belt. We've shared some of the same coaches. There's been a lot of players that grew up playing together in the youth level that then go to each other's respective universities, and now there's rivalries. But for a long time, the game wasn't. So for a long time, the game was played in a very historic rivalry. At one point, it's blurred behind me, but that's a black and white picture of a game in Busch Stadium where there was over 22,000 people in attendance for that game. Um, and then for a long time, it wasn't played because SIUE was a Division II university for a long time, so the game kind of went away. Mario Sanchez, who was the coach here before me, and Kevin Kalish, the current head coach at St. Louis University. He was also a former assistant coach here at SIUE. They were the ones, so I credit those guys to get that game back going. I think 2017, I believe, was the first time it was back up and running. My first year here was 2019. So they were the ones. I credit them. They got it going. It was a home and home series for a couple years. Played at SLU, played here, and then since the inception of St. Louis City, a couple years ago that they wanted to get involved as well. And so, what a cool opportunity, not only for our programs to play in that atmosphere at the MLS stadium, but also, I mean, for each other's universities, for the communities, for the youth soccer in the area. Um, I will say this: St. Louis City's atmosphere at the MLS games is unbelievable. The fans, it's an educated fan base. It's been an exciting team the last couple of years. They went to the playoffs in the first year and won the conference. Um, but they're hard tickets to come by, to be honest. I mean, they're pricey. They sell out. So for the everyday casual soccer fan, or for some youth kids, they might not have a chance or have had a chance to get themselves in that stadium yet. And so when you have two historic college soccer teams coming into a stadium, we had almost 9,000 fans there about a year and a half ago. Like, it was such an awesome, exciting atmosphere. But yeah, it's a special thing to be a part of. When I was interviewing here, I already knew before I had a chance to step foot on the field in the Bronze Boot. I knew how important it was. I had watched the two previous year Bronze Boot games, and it's something that the alums are very passionate about. The players are very passionate about. The departments, the staff. So it's an awesome historic rivalry. We've been fortunate to be on the right side of the result the last 2 years in two very tough matches. Happy with that. And there's a traveling trophy. The Bronze Boot's not just a term. There's actually a big trophy with the Bronze Boot on top of it. And the winner keeps that for a year, so that's in our possession, and we're hoping to keep it, make it three in a row this year. But such a special historic rivalry. I'm honored to be a part of it and excited to continue on.
And building off of that, because the city of St. Louis, whether professionally, collegiately, it has such a special soccer history. U.S. Open Cup championships, national championships, now MLS team there in town. And for those that don't know, those that haven't experienced it, what's it like being in that St. Louis metro area, in that soccer community? How special is it to be part of that?
Well, I will give a shout out to my former boss at Michigan State, Damon Rensing.
Hey.
He is a St. Louis native. Um, he's been the long time was a long time assistant coach, then head coach at Michigan State. I was fortunate to work alongside Damon for about 4.5 years. And when I got the job here, he told me that my soccer IQ is going to go up by 10 points just by living in this area. That is the thought process of the locals here. I mean, it is a soccer rich, diehard community. There's so much history, former national team players, current national team players. The youth leagues, the high school soccer scene. It's one of the richest high school soccer scenes in the country, while also maintaining high level academies and ECNL and different level clubs from top to bottom in that pyramid. So it is a soccer community, and it's an awesome part to be a part of. I've got a young almost 6-year-old now, so he's playing with all the kids around here. It's such a prominent sport in the area, I've coached in college soccer in Michigan in 2 different universities. I've coached in Chicago, Chicagoland area, and now down here in St. Louis, and can attest that the soccer is one of the top sports. And by the way, you have historic St. Louis Cardinals, St. Louis Blues. Like, it's not like soccer is the only sport here. You have a lot of rich sporting history, but honestly, as one of the hubs of soccer, it's such a multicultural area. There's an Italian community.
And the Hill.
The Hill is a area. The Hill is a very famous Italian community. A lot of German and English immigrants early on. There's a Spanish community. Fairmont City's not too far from here. Spanish society. There's so with that kind of melting pot over the years, soccer has continued to be at the forefront of the sporting kind of attention around here. So we love it. We love it. And now with the addition of St. Louis City, it's been almost exponential, the attention and the excitement of the sport around here.
One of my biggest regrets when I was back there for the OVC tournament was that I did not get a chance to go over to the Hill and go eat some great Italian food like I used to with my parents when I was a kid. But you mentioned something earlier, and I have to watch myself because the free Zoom is starting to run out of time. So I have to watch myself. But you mentioned about your Division II roots. And one thing that stood out to me in the OVC championship game when I was putting my boards together, almost half your starting 11 in that championship game were non-Division I transfers into your program. How are you
Yeah.
able to find these non-D1 guys, these diamonds in the rough, so to speak, that really can ball out at the next level?
Yeah, one, we're fortunate in this area. We have some top D2 and NAIA programs, some good D3 stuff as well. So, we see a lot of players and how they, transition from the club level, go to college, and, start continue to develop. But myself, I played at a school called Saginaw Valley State. I was fortunate to be the head coach at my alma mater for 5 years, where we went all the way from never going to an NCAA tournament to going all the way to the national championship final. And so I've seen it not only as a player and some of my teammates and myself and the development in that league and division, but also coaching and moving into the Division I ranks, seeing how some players can come in and transition, and it's just about identifying kids. I'll speak on Rob Jalai for a minute. Rob Jalai was a D2 kid for 4 years, and then transferred here for grad school. Came in as our goalkeeper. He was as good as any Division I goalkeeper in the country. Unfortunately, before the NCAA tournament match, he had a little injury in the warm up and wasn't able to play. But he came in here and went from a D2 school, small D2 school in Michigan, to being the first team all region goalkeeper in a very tough region, by the way. We have the Horizon League in our region. We have the Big Ten in our region. He was the first team all region goalkeeper, was the goalkeeper of the year for us. And honestly, sometimes kids like that, if they go into a top Division I program as a freshman, they might have to sit for a year or two. And if they can find themselves in the right environment, and sometimes that's a great path. We've talked about it with some of our own success stories with that, like a Wesley Gibson. But sometimes going into a different level and getting an opportunity to play games early on in your career and using games as development. And then at a certain time, like a kid like Rob, he graduated, he held up his end of the bargain with his former school and was looking for a new opportunity, and came here for grad school. He's graduated with a master's degree, and was fantastic. But we have quite a few guys like that. Jacobo Senfelio, I mentioned earlier. We also had some junior college kids that have done well for us. But we've also had just kids that come straight from high school and they're with us for 4 to 5 years or whatever it is, and they're here the whole time. So we're always looking for the right formula of players and people. We don't really care what level club you played for or what division you transferred from. Our philosophy is: are you a good player? Are you a good person? Do you have those intangibles we look for? And I even see it with the national team. Not every kid is identified at 17 years old or 15 years old and playing in the top academies and playing in the national team. You see some of these late bloomers now that play 4 or 5 years of college, then they play in the lower level leagues, or they're in MLS for a couple years. They're not in Europe, and then the next thing you know, they're tearing it up on the national team when they get their opportunities. So no stone left unturned is kind of our that old cliche adage. But at the same time, you never know where you're going to find the kid or when the kid is going to bloom or blossom. So the last part of that is I used to have a quote in my office back in my old former school that said, like, when you're evaluating a kid, don't look at the player he is today, look at the player that he can become. And so we take a big emphasis on that in how we recruit. It's not about like if a kid on day one is going to be a stud. It's like, what can he turn into in your environment? And it's awesome to see how some of these kids have transitioned from other schools or other conferences, other divisions, and had success here. But it's also awesome to see our kids that come in as recruits, as freshmen, and they bide their time and they develop and they redshirt, and a couple years later they're absolute, invaluable for the program.
It's like I always say, if you can ball, right?
Yeah, and if you're good enough, you're old enough. That's the other one. I mean, you see some young kids tearing it up at the college level, and it's very cool to see young players, and at the pro level as well. But seeing young players get those opportunities and thrive. And so we've got a couple good young kids in the program, and I'm excited about them as well.
Well, Coach, I appreciate you carving out some time to talk. It's always great to catch up with St. Louis area soccer and SIUE. Good to see you again, and thanks for joining the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Go Cougars. And by the time I see you next time, I'm going to have a nice fancy background and better lighting for you because you are looking good and sounding great today. So great to catch up.